In today's video, we are going to be discussing Venus in the 8th house. Why this house has a bad reputation, why Venus in the 8th house often gets seen as being difficult, and why I believe Venus in the 8th house can be as beneficial and as wonderful as anywhere else in the birth chart. So without further ado, let's get into it. If you are new here, you are very welcome. If you are a repeat offender, you know you're in good company, so welcome back. And before we begin this video, it would be really helpful if you knew your Venus placement. I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you may know someone with an 8th house Venus, or you yourself may have an 8th house Venus, or perhaps you just want to know more about this placement, and that's all fine. There's plenty of free resources out there to find out your birth chart. So let's get into this. First of all, I'm going to discuss the 8th house. So the 8th house primarily is about the karmic debts that we pay to be here in the physical realm of our soul's experience in physical manifestation in this reality. It's karmic debt. What does that encompass and what does that really mean? Well, firstly, it touches on rebirth, death, inheritance, taxes, sexuality, control and power, because that's what karma is. It's the expression of energy. Now, I'm going to mention karma a lot during this video, and I am not an expert on karma, and I'm not an expert on the traditional Hindu and Vedic interpretations of karma, which is one of the births of, it's the birth of that word at least. If you have 8th house placements, they are going to feel more karmic, and there is going to be a lot of energy attached to them, which is beyond your physical reach, because karma is the exchange of energy. And so even things that are mundane within the 8th house, like taxes, like debt, and like the physical act of lovemaking, it's going to feel an imprint on you in a bigger way, because that energy could have played out in childhood or in a past life, or it just feels more intense and more important. Is intensity bad? No. Is karmic debt bad? No. All it is an exchange of energy. So that is what the 8th house is dealing with. We cannot exist on this planet without the process of death. We cannot exist on this planet without the process of rebirth, and we have to pay our debts. So the 8th house is like, if you think about the 7th house, first of all, the house that precedes the 8th house. The 7th house is about the commitment, the contract of relationships. So it's usually love partnerships, it's usually your marriage, it's partnerships in business, it's things to do with legal matters, it's that contract of love, that bond of love. The 8th house is like, did you sell your soul to learn how to play the blues? And if you did, you're going to have to pay it back. And then if we look at the 9th house, the 9th house is about belief. So if you believed that when you made that contract in the 7th house, you're working through that in the 8th house, and you're going to have to learn how to do that in the 9th house. So you see the progression there of the chart. Primarily, what we are dealing with the 8th house is the payment of the debts that you've accrued in all the other houses. What do you have to pay back? What does it take for you to live your best life? Why is that valuable? Why is it important? Why is karma important? Why do you have to exercise these things? And the 8th house is saying, I want to pay back this because this will help me to get to the 9th house, which is the house of belief and expansion and understanding, and it's a very Jupiterian house of higher knowledge and higher learning and higher belief systems. And you can't get there without the 8th house, without the rebirth, without the death, without paying the debt back first. You have to pay your karmic debts so that you can evolve. So different aspects of our life. The karma is like the drop of water in a sea. It ripples outwards and slowly resonates and fills the world with love. And that's what karma is. When we have bad days, when we have difficult times, and when we have bad moments, what the 8th house is doing is turning that tide and rippling out something that we don't really want to come back to us. We're annoyed. We're creating a ripple effect of being annoyed or being angry or difficult base emotions, which are still valid and they still need to be released, but the energy exchange is going to ripple outwards into the world, and that's not always a nice energy for other people to come in contact with. 8th house is dealing with these huge, big, vast topics. Do not fear the 8th house, first of all. And that is primarily my take on the 8th house. Now, the other thing that I will say is, on a very mundane level, as I've mentioned, the 8th house is about taxes, and it's about control and power and the act of lovemaking and the exchange of paying your debts off, paying your karmic debts, paying your literal debts. Now I'm going to bring Venus into the mix, because when we have Venus in the 8th house natal, that energy interacts slightly differently as to when we have Venus in the transiting our 8th house. When we have Venus transiting our 8th house, those practical elements of the 8th house are going to be more present. When we have Venus in our birth chart in the 8th house, we are talking about the more expansive, karmic, ancestral energies, which I've mentioned. But that doesn't mean that the transit can't deal with those things, but it's definitely going to appear on a more mundane level. So, what does Venus in the 8th house mean? Why is it superb? Why do people get bogged down in it being negative? You bring the planet of love and beauty and money into the 8th house, what you are doing is you are inviting an energy which says, let's talk about rebirth and transformation and self-liberation and the dynamic between control and power and liberation and ancestry. Let's talk about those dynamics, and let's talk about them in a Venusian way. And so we're going to be looking at things like sexuality. We're going to be looking at desire and ideas of control and ideas of how you spend your money. That's going to be a massive thing with Venus in that. If you have Venus as your natal placement in the 8th house, you are going to be either completely evaporating any form of inheritance or legacy, or you are going to be dealing very much with other people's money and other people's and inheritance that you receive, or inheritance that you want to leave behind for your loved ones. So that's a very practical element. Now, Venusians in the 8th house are very alluring. They have somewhat this energy of like, and I've mentioned it a few times on my video for Venus in all 12 houses. When we discuss the 8th house, we're talking about like the Bond girl. We're talking about someone who is has a lot of sexuality, has a lot of potency, and they just ooze a very Venusian energy of being lush and powerful and full of allure, irrespective of what star sign. If you have Venus in the 8th house, you are going to be alluring. You're going to be alluring to the opposite sex, even if you're into the same sex or different genders. The opposite to you is going to be drawn to you. You draw people in through your power, and you have a richness of that power, and a lot of that power will come through your physical appearance, the way you move your body, your aura, your vibe. Now, as an example, we could look at someone who wasn't on the surface particularly attractive, but they, through their style and presence and sense of self, they become intoxicatingly beautiful. And it's that vibe. And that's primarily when you have Venus in the 8th house in a natal position. That's who you are. You're just powerful and dominant and wonderfully alluring. Why is that an issue? Okay, let's get real. It is an issue because we have come from a society, and lots of different cultures and societies have an issue about people using their power and their sexuality and themselves to get what they want. It is seen as something extremely negative. It is perceived as something dangerous, something other, something away from what we want. And in that sense, it's quite a Lilith energy. So it's seen as dark in some way. It's not though, is it? You know, if we're talking about like Venus in the 1st house, where you just sort of, people just gravitate towards you because you're just yourself. No one's judging you for being yourself. But as soon as you are yourself with a Venus in the 8th house and you're just naturally powerful, the judgment is there because people are intimidated by that. For 8th house placements, the best thing you can do is to sit in that power. Whether you want to give away some power or give away some control, or however that dynamic works for you, you initially have to be mindful and aware of that. And it is beautiful. It's beautiful to have such lush, wonderful, karmic exchanges that are so much about paying karmic debts. And by the way, that's another thing with Venusians in the 8th house, is you want to pay your debts back. You want to be in control of how you spend your money and what you spend your money on. And you don't spend money lightly. You buy quality goods. You want things to matter. You want to leave them behind. You want to spend money on expensive things that you can have for a really long time, that you can look back on and still, of 30 years time, you can say, I've owned this and it's still functional. It's still beautiful. It's still demure and elegant. There is a timeless quality about you Venusians in the 8th house. You age, depending on your ascendant, okay, and how the other planets interact, but generally you age very demurely and gracefully. And yes, you do age, but the way you do it is, just, this is all natural, this grey. I'm not a Venus in the 8th house, but you would very much, grow grey gracefully, okay? So the other thing that I really like about Venus in the 8th house is you guys get to play with sex in a way that Venus in the other houses don't necessarily have the power, control, or confidence to do. Where it may have been tricky for you in the past if you have difficult angles to Venus, or if you know, if your what we call Venus is afflicted, or you've got like a huge Venusian Jupiterian energy going on, like a grand trine with Venus and Jupiter, or Jupiter's conjunct Venus, or Mars is conjunct Venus, and there's this sense of like extra. It can have been challenging when you were younger to balance out that sexuality and to feel empowered. But we're all adults here, and you have the right to be empowered and to have empowered yourself fully and to step into that at any point in your life. If you're not there yet, give it a go, because it comes very natural to you. And if you are there, fantastic, loving that for you. When it comes to ancestry and legacy, that is a real Venus in the 8th house is a really interesting placement, because you are likely to be very connected to your female ancestors, to the birth mothers, to the Venusian elements of your ancestral self. So stuff to do with, again, inheritance, like what your grandparents or your great-grandparents left you in the physical world. So do you own family heirlooms? Are possessions important to you from the past? The 8th house is not a house of dogma. It's a house of manifestation. It's a house of creation and universal consciousness and magic. So you want to be dealing with manifesting into the physical world, and that's primarily how the karma goes for Venusians in the 8th house as well. Any action that you undertake is going to play into how you are received by your descendants, even if you don't have children, or you know, you are a singular person with no blood relatives. Again, we're coming back to that like ripple energy in the ocean. You may choose to donate your money, your house, your inheritance to charities, and that would ripple out into a karma. Just to summarize, Venus in the 8th house is not bad. Venus in the 8th house is karmic. It's manifestation. So when Venus transits the 8th house, we are going to be in a state of manifestation. We want to be bringing forward our desires, and we want to control those desires through direct manifestation. Now, a very, very literal sense of this is, in the back of your head, your Venus is transiting your 8th house, and you are like, right, I need to write my will, because I have this beautiful big house that I need to make sure my children have the best resources available to them for when I pass on. Or I want to donate all my money to that cat charity because that's really important to me. So you write your will. So that's a really, really basic example of how ideas and legacy and karma is manifested physically. So when Venus is transit in the 8th house, that's what you're working with. Now, the other thing is the 8th house can be about taboos. So it's only taboo in our culture, right? Our Western culture. A lot of these things that are taboo are not an issue in other cultures. So therefore, the 8th house is only taboo if you have that belief system. If you have a very black and white belief system, then things like magic are going to be taboo. But magic is just another form of dispersing energy, of the intentional movement of energy. So that's what it is. It's intentional thought. And that's what we need to be doing when we are having a transit of Venus through our 8th house. We need to be intentional, because that's the time to do it. Now, if you want to get into a dynamic of lust and sexuality and play and power dynamics, awesome as well, because that's also a physical manifestation of direct intention. So that's also a great time. It's not all serious, the 8th house, but it tends to lend itself more to the serious elements because it is about paying your debt. Did you sell your soul to the devil? And if you did, how do you get out of that situation? How do you pay that debt without losing yourself? So I hope that's been really useful. It's another long video. Please let me know how you experience Venus in the 8th house, either as a transit, if you are really into looking at the transits, or if you are a Venusian in the 8th house, what your experience is, how that links to the star sign that is in the 8th house for you, whether you think I'm accurate, whether you don't, you know, put a description, a comment in the description section below, and we can have a conversation about it because I'm interested. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me to grow this community. It helps me to learn as well as an astrologer and a practitioner of astrology and a practitioner of lots of forms of divination. I am ever learning and expanding my knowledge and being informed by my experiences and interactions with other people. So there is always movement and there is always lessons to be learned, and I am always learning from you. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.